Childhood. Youth. We all love that phase, don't we? No doubt, if you ask the average adult right now the most enjoyable parts of their life, most would choose childhood without missing a beat. Wonderful as the childhood phase was, though, here is the deep, dark, secret truth. It was not all roses and flowers. In fact, it was actually horrible. The trick was that we were ignorant about this. Or so we thought. For some, bad things happened in life while we were growing up. As children, we were resilient and bounced back from the terrible things that happened. We smiled, we laughed, we played around, and no one noticed the little changes in our behavior. Even we might not notice it. As adults, we now know how easy it was for the adults around us to brush over the terrible events that happened in our lives. With statements like, "He was so young when it happened, I doubt he even remembers." Many people try to brush over the traumatic events that occurred when you were a child. Now that you know better, how can you deal with it? If you want answers to that burning question, then you need to watch this video till the end. What is childhood trauma? Despite the sudden popularity in the use of the term, trauma is very hard to define. Childhood trauma is officially defined as any scary, dangerous, violent, or life-threatening event that occurs to a child between the ages of 0 and 18. A more encompassing definition calls trauma any type of experience or event that a child experiences that threatens the child's life or bodily integrity. The thing about childhood trauma is that it does not have to occur to the child directly to be termed as childhood trauma. Watching a loved one suffer can be highly traumatic to a child. Exposure to violence can also prove traumatic to children. As long as the child is affected, whether directly or indirectly, the events can affect the psychological development of the child. When these events take place during childhood, you might have been feeling very overwhelmed, upset, or helpless. It is important to note, though, that not all overwhelming or life-threatening events can be considered traumatic. This is because children are different and they interpret their experiences differently. While one child may consider a life experience traumatic, another might not think twice of it. Events are considered traumatic when they are scary, dangerous, or violent. If we face or witness an immediate threat to ourselves or our loved ones, probably accompanied by serious harm or injury, it is possible that we become traumatized. This makes sense, after all. Such scary events elicit strong emotions within us, such as fear, loss, and distress, even as adults. For some people, the strong urges of negative emotions in response to this experience results in trauma. For others, the trauma arises from their inability to do anything to stop or alter the course of events from taking place. How do people deal with trauma? There are several ways people react to traumatic events. For most, the effect of trauma reverberates throughout their lives. It even affects basic things such as how to get through the day. Traumatic events can create changes in the child's mental, physical, social, emotional, and/or spiritual life. Some of the bad things that affect children as they grow can be natural disasters, such as flooding or hurricanes that alter the normalcy and routine that symbolizes home for the child. Other events, such as physical abuse or the death of a loved one, can also result in childhood trauma. This is because those events yank the safety mat and sense of normalcy a child needs while growing up. Some examples of the leading cause of childhood trauma include: Number 1. Bullying or cyberbullying. 2. Abuse, physical, emotional, or sexual. 3. Death of a loved one. Childhood trauma does not end when a child becomes an adult. Without an expiration date, it continues to manifest itself in the life of the child when he or she becomes an adult. A natural aspect of every child's development process is learning how to deal with, understand, and cope with the challenges of life. However, some issues become too difficult for children to comprehend. The child then becomes stuck, unable to process the sequence of events that occurred, resulting in a traumatic experience. These feelings often become highly intense, so that they get in the way of their physical, emotional, and intellectual development, thus resulting in childhood trauma. Left unaddressed, the trauma produces long-term effects in the life of the child when he or she grows up to be an adult. How to heal from childhood trauma? The resilience of children can only do so much. While many children are like rubber balls bouncing back from just about any type of situation, some situations remain stuck and become traumatic for the child. Many adults today carry about with them at least one childhood trauma that was never properly addressed. As the result of the childhood trauma, they are dealing with the psychological consequences in their adulthood now. Thankfully, there are ways to deal with the childhood trauma experienced as a kid and live a more fulfilled and robust life. Here are some ways you can heal your childhood trauma and reclaim your life. Number 1. Acknowledge and recognize the trauma for what it is. Almost everyone who experienced trauma when they were children do one of two things. Either they attempt to dismiss the event and pretend it does not matter, or they assume blame and become burdened with guilt and responsibility for the event. However, neither of those responses is right. Something terrible happened when you were a child, and it was not your fault. Despite what you have spent years telling yourself, it was not your fault. To heal, you first have to accept the fact that it wasn't your fault. You were just a child. On the other hand, you have to deal with the terrible knowledge that whatever that traumatic event was, it happened. Yes, you were not the only one it happened to. Yes, it happened years ago. Be that as it may, something terrible happened to you. Accept that, and do not try to assume responsibility for it. It happened, but it was not your fault. Number 2. Reclaim control. One of the hallmarks of childhood trauma is utter helplessness. You were not in control when you were a child, nor could you change the course of events. This feeling of helplessness manifests itself when you become an adult, and it controls how you behave. It makes you feel, act, and see yourself as a victim. Adults who suffer from childhood trauma tend to make choices based on the events that occurred in the past. Those who suffer from childhood trauma make decisions in their presentation based on the events of the past. Every word they say, actions they take, and feelings they feel can be traced back to the traumatic event of their childhood. This results in the persistent feeling of helplessness. By taking control of your present, you are taking one step towards healing. This means you make decisions based on now and regain control. As long as you are willing to let go of the old defenses and coping mechanisms you used as a child to get through your trauma, you will be able to regain control of your life. By doing so, you will have a better handle on the constant struggle between your past and your present and take conscious steps to heal your pain. Number 3. Seek help and don't isolate yourself. Another common trait among trauma survivors is the desire to isolate themselves from others. While it seems like a perfectly good idea, it is not. Isolation is a killer, and it would not do anything but make the situation worse. When you isolate yourself, you will find it difficult to block the negative voices and the critical thoughts that threaten to overwhelm you. To truly heal from your childhood trauma, you have to be willing to open up and connect with other people. Making an effort to maintain your relationships will also go a long way in helping you heal from your trauma. Talk to a trusted family member or friend. Look for a counselor you can connect with and speak up with. You can also consider joining a support group for survivors of childhood trauma. Number 4. Take care of your health. The healthier you are, the better you are at handling stress. The process of handling and healing from childhood trauma is a highly stressful one. To become successful in this war you have waged against the childhood trauma that has held you down for so long, you need to be fit for it. Establish a routine for yourself that ensures you get plenty of rest. Follow a well-balanced diet regimen and an exercise routine. Stay away from alcohol and drugs. While they might provide temporary relief, their long-term effect is not pleasurable. Drugs and alcohol will simply increase your feelings of depression, anxiety, and isolation, which will worsen your trauma. Number 5. Learn the true meaning of acceptance and letting go. Understanding the true meaning of terms can be a great help in your journey to healing from your childhood trauma. And just because you're accepting your trauma does not mean you are embracing it. It does not mean that you like what happened to you or you agree with it. It does not mean that you accept that you deserve it. Acceptance means that you have chosen a path to take and a strategy to deal with the bad cards that life has dealt you. Just because you choose to let go does not mean that everything is going to evaporate in a whiff of smoke. It does not mean that all your troubles are going to magically disappear. What letting go means is that you are not going to allow the bad things that happened to you to deny you the chance to have a good life now. It means that you're going to work against the bad feelings and the horrible memories to make something of yourself now. Number 6. Replace bad habits with good ones. Bad habits do not just mean drinking or using drugs. It has several forms that include negativity, pessimism, and huge mistrust of others. These bad habits might have been your coping mechanism to deal with the traumatic events that happened to you when you were a kid. This makes them especially difficult to break, as they are the crutches that help you deal with your trauma in the best way you knew how to as a child. However, in your journey towards healing, you have to learn to let go of those habits and develop good habits to help you live a bountiful and fulfilled life, free of childhood traumas. Conclusion. Childhood traumas are terrible things to happen to a child. Despite the best efforts of many parents, these things happen and they distort the development of the child. It then reveals itself in several forms in adulthood. As an adult, it is now left to you to deal with the horrible events that happened to you as a child. Be sure to be patient with yourself as you work to heal from the events that happened when you had no control. Why don't you try any of the tips mentioned and let us know your progress in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like and hit the subscribe button. Oh, and turn on post notifications. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.